Good morning. I'm still reporting on the invasion. According to Law Enforcement Today, military-aged Chinese nationals are continuing to pour into the United States illegally across the California border and disappearing into the country at terrifying speed. In fiscal 2023, over 37,000 illegal Chinese aliens were encountered at the porous southern border, with an additional 20,000 having crossed since October when fiscal 2024 began. According to Representative Tony Gonzalez, a Republican from Texas, it's very clear that the Sinaloa cartel is the one controlling that operation and sending Chinese more towards the California-Arizona corridor that they control. The alarming influx of potential Chinese military is raising alarm bells among certain members of Congress. These military-aged men could easily become an instant-on, well-trained fighting force inside the U.S. once they had access to pre-planned weapons caches. For years, analysts have dismissed the possibility of a heavily armed Chinese invasion of the continental United States, theorizing that it would take a naval armada to transfer such a large fighting force. However, what if Chinese intelligence assets gained a foothold inside the American political and military structure sufficient to allow the covert entry of such a force at a moderate rate of a few hundred per day, disguised as civilian refugees? What if the number of those covert combatants could reach 50,000 before anyone discovered the plan, much less attempted to stem the tide? What if these combatants were staged here in case they were needed to prevent President Trump from returning to the presidency? A force of 50,000 already here to support a traitorous insurgency would be a significant problem, especially if they sprang into action between the election and Trump's inauguration. Biden's people would still be in control of the U.S. military, a frightening prospect. They could order U.S. forces to stand down until certain important military objectives had been secured by Chinese nationals. This is not a pretty picture. However, this is not an impossibility. In fact, you have to rank this at this point as a probability. As former CIA Director Mike Pompeo put it nearly 1 year ago, they already are inside the gates.
Joining me now, Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State under President Trump. Mr. Secretary, anyone who's banned from one of these elite institutions is okay by me, but they say that you weren't speaking because of COVID, but you say it was something else.
Well, Laura, it's great to be with you. I know exactly what it was. I had prepared some remarks about exactly the topic we're speaking about, the Chinese Communist Party's influence in American academia. Research money that leads to theft of intellectual property hardworking Americans lose, Chinese students on campus feeding information back to the Chinese Communist Party, all of the donor money that goes to win friends and influence people on these campuses. I was going to give a speech. I was a Secretary of State. We had decided that MIT was the best place to give that speech. And a handful of weeks out before the remarks, I was told I was no longer welcome there. I had to go down a pretty long list. I ultimately gave the speech at Georgia Tech, go Ramblin' Wreck. And you can see it. And it was not about my viewpoint necessarily. It was about facts and influence, how the Chinese Communist Party is inculcating our next generation of leaders in the very ideas that we are now seeing play out across our campuses all across the country. And
Mr. Secretary, the Washington Post reported today that the Chinese military has been in the process of disrupting key American infrastructure, including power and water utilities, as well as communications and transportation systems. Among the victims are a water utility in Hawaii, a major West Coast port, and at least one oil and gas pipeline. Now, you're also the head of the CIA for a while. We're going to see more of this as Xi and Biden get closer and closer? What's going on here?
Laura, undoubtedly, if President Biden doesn't respond to the threat inside the gates, we often, when we talk about the Chinese Communist Party, talk about Taiwan or the South China Sea. They're inside the gates. We talked about them being in our institutions. You'll recall that I directed the closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas, which was, I think, the largest spying operation ever inside of our country. They are infiltrating all of our institutions. Your point about attacking our infrastructure is a very, very real threat, and we need to get serious about preserving this. This is about the American families and its capacity to operate in a way that isn't influenced by Chinese propaganda. We can absolutely do it, Laura. President Biden's got to take it seriously.
And the tens of thousands of Chinese crossing our southern border, they just want a better life? Odd.
I'm sure there's a few of them that's true for. A significant number of them are coming here with deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party, and we can be sure, Laura, almost none of them are up to any good when they come here at the direction of the party.
I'm still reporting from just outside the one-time citadel of world freedom. Good day.